We have a habit of thinking of China and North Korea as allies. Indeed, China's Mao Zedong once described them as close as lips and teeth. North Korea is the only country with which China has a mutual defense treaty. China showed its support by sending large military formations to help North Korea during the Korean War, resulting in the elimination or wounding of 500,000 soldiers, including Mao's son and potential successor. Decades later, these relations have become a fundamental element in the development of the Russian-Chinese-North Korean imperialist partnership. But despite this history, there has been significant friction between China and North Korea over the years. China did not give North Korea the help it wanted in developing nuclear weapons. Beijing feared that North Korean aggression could lead to a war on the peninsula that would affect China. For the same reason, Beijing has limited but still supported UN Security Council sanctions against North Korea's nuclear weapons tests. At the same time, Beijing was concerned about possible North Korean nuclear weapons threats against it. Meanwhile, North Korea has a history of challenging Chinese influence. This frustrates China, which seeks regional, if not global, dominance. In 2013, China felt betrayed when Kim Jong-un executed Kim's uncle Jang Song-thaek, who was North Korea's interlocutor with China. In the aftermath, a very serious rumor emerged. The sentences in the rumor were, "Japan is our enemy of 100 years. China is our enemy of 1,000 years." Yet both sides often avoid openly expressing their differences. One of the most significant disruptions of the China-North Korea partnership occurred in 2017, providing a useful example of how information operations can respond to threats to the Russia-China-North Korea partnership. Despite the adversities, China's biggest goal in Northeast Asia seems to be stability. North Korea, on the other hand, seeks to destabilize South Korea in the hope of gaining influence and ultimately dominance over it. North Korea's development of nuclear weapons, especially intercontinental ballistic missiles, is key to its strategy. But this is not as easy as Mr. Kim had planned. To understand this more clearly, we need to refer again to an example from 2017. At that time, the China-North Korea conflict started with Kim's New Year's Day speech. Kim threatened to test an ICBM in 2017. This was something that the United States would perceive as destabilizing the region. The next day, then-President-elect Donald Trump suggested that this would not happen. This is probably exactly what Kim wanted. If Kim had been able to launch an ICBM in 2017, North Korea would have been seen to have overcome the Americans, seen as North Korea's main rival. So, what could Trump have done to stop Kim? In 2006, former US defense officials William Perry and Ash Carter suggested that if North Korea put an ICBM on a launch pad for testing, the US should blow it up to prevent North Korea from developing ICBMs. But Kim was preparing a mobile ICBM that could be launched from anywhere, not just from a few North Korean launch pads that the US could monitor. North Korea had announced that it could launch ballistic missiles from anywhere in the country at any time. On February 12th of that year, North Korea launched a new medium-range solid fuel missile. A few days after the launch, North Korean media reported that the test was a preliminary shot towards the development of a North Korean ICBM. Kim seemed to be standing up to Trump. But behind the scenes, things were very different. China has always been concerned that North Korea's irresponsible actions could lead to an escalation that could destabilize the region. That is why China asked the United States not to escalate the situation, and for Washington to ignore Kim Jong-un's insane actions and tests. A day after the missile launch, the attackers eliminated Kim's half-brother, Kim Jong-nam, in Malaysia. Kim Jong-nam was living in Beijing and Macau under the protection of Chinese security services, but for some reason, he was in Malaysia without Chinese protection. The attackers were led by North Koreans, and the North Korean security services would have needed Kim Jong-un's approval to carry out this action. China was apparently deeply disturbed by the murder, but also deeply displeased by North Korea's missile launch the day before. A week later, China ordered North Korea to cut off coal exports to China, a move consistent with a recent UN Security Council resolution. In the year preceding that resolution, Chinese imports accounted for about 40% of North Korea's coal exports. The cut would thus severely limit the hard currency in North Korea's hands. Pyongyang's response was strong. A few days later, North Korea accused China of dancing to the US beat. This was a public criticism that North Korea had previously avoided. When this accusation failed to persuade China to withdraw its ban, North Korea continued to inflame the situation. In early March, it launched 5 long-range Scud missiles at Japan with a range of 1,000 kilometers. 1 missile failed, but the other 4 were successful, and 3 of the 4 hit Japan's exclusive economic zone. North Korea claimed the launch was part of a drill to attack US forces bases in Japan in an emergency. North Korea's missile launch was not a surprise. The US and South Korea had just started their annual Foal Eagle exercises, and North Korea had been carrying out frequent provocations in response. But if North Korea was angry with the US and China, why was it firing missiles at Japan? And why was it firing them from near the Sohae satellite station in northwest North Korea, where they could only reach one of the 6 major US air bases in Japan? Why didn't North Korea fire its longer-range Nodong missiles and did so from the east coast? Alternatively, if Foal Eagle was the root cause of this provocation, why didn't North Korea fire Scud-B or Scud-C missiles further south to a range of 300 to 500 kilometers, the distance needed to hit targets in the Arctic? North Korea was probably trying to send another message with these launches. If we examine the range circle in the other direction from North Korea's chosen launch point, we can see that these North Korean missiles could cover most of China, including Beijing, Shanghai, and about half of the largest Chinese cities, clearly demonstrating the North's ability to threaten China. Before disregarding this perspective, consider that North Korea chose the second day of the Chinese National People's Congress to launch the missiles. That would have angered China. China was not unaware of this threat. Even in early 2017, China had deployed 2 over-the-horizon radars similar to the THAAD radar deployed in South Korea to detect possible missile launches from the Korean peninsula towards China. HQ-19 missile defense systems were also in place on the Shandong Peninsula to counter threats. At that time, what country, other than North Korea, would have fired ballistic missiles in northeast China where such a THAAD-like defense was necessary? North Korea's games were not over yet. From late March to April, North Korea tested 4 more ballistic missiles, all of which failed. This was seen as a serious embarrassment for Kim Jong-un. During this time, China was telling North Korea to stop its missile launches, but Pyongyang was defiant. By mid-April, China was apparently fed up with the continued nuclear bluffs of its longtime ally, North Korea. The Beijing regime threatened that the Chinese People's Liberation Army would launch attacks on DPRK nuclear facilities on its own if North Korea crossed China, undermining the security and stability of Northeast Asia. Beijing has so much power that it could easily let this go. According to this mindset, sooner or later a rational attitude would prevail in Pyongyang, and the isolated North Korean leaders would realize that they had to adapt to China's preferences. In early May, North Korea directly criticized China. In a commentary, Pyongyang condemned China's insincerity and betrayal, saying that the Beijing regime should no longer try to test the limits of the DPRK's patience. Pyongyang also said that Beijing should bear the heavy consequences of this reckless act, which is the foundation of China's relations. Meanwhile, Chinese military and diplomatic observers said that China does not have to defend Pyongyang because its nuclear weapons development violates the Mutual Defense Pact. North Korea tested 3 more ballistic missiles between mid and late May. Each test appeared to be at least a partial success and increased the threat posed by North Korea. Neither the US nor South Korea took any serious action against North Korea in response. In Pyongyang, this was probably interpreted as further victory for Kim, showing that he could get away with missile launches. Thus, North Korea successfully launched 2 ICBMs in July and an even more capable ICBM in November. Most recently, the North Korean side upped the ante and took a more daring step. The South Korean military announced that North Korea launched a ballistic missile towards the Sea of Japan during the visit of US Secretary of State Antony Blinken to Seoul. South Korean military analysts suggested that Pyongyang may have tested a hypersonic weapon equipped with a solid fuel engine. Japan's defense ministry reported that North Korea's first missile launch in nearly 2 months fell outside Japan's exclusive economic zone, with no damage to aircraft or ships. Although there was no damage, North Korea's missile test into the Sea of Japan has probably heated up the global agenda. The Chinese side is expected to take a much tougher stance after North Korea's latest test. The Beijing regime is likely to pull Kim Jong-un's ear hard before the Trump era begins. Mr. Xi does not want his economy to weaken under US sanctions because of North Korea. As China's efforts to blockade Taiwan continue, Mr. Xi will not allow Kim Jong-un's missile tests and one mistake to upset these plans. It is expected that the US will be the one to distance the Xi government from Taiwan on this issue. In short, there is a very tense atmosphere in the Pacific, and in this environment, it seems as if a single light wind will upset all the balances. Thank you for watching.